Hey everyone, I'm at the Westbury Car Show, Westbury Classic Car Show, and I'm just going to show you around a little bit. We'll take a look at the different cars here. There's all sorts from Japanese classics, American, Australian stuff, all kinds of things. Let's have a bit of a wander around and see what we can see. Westbury is nestled in the picturesque north of Tasmania, and is a small town with around 2,000 permanent residents. Westbury offers a delightful blend of history, natural beauty, and a close-knit community. It's a Tasmanian gem, and it beckons visitors to explore its rich heritage and its tranquil surroundings. Tranquility that's been broken today by the thump and roar of V8 engines. The Westbury Car Show has been run for many years now by the local Rotary Club. It has a gold coin donation which is required for entry, and all proceeds go to local charities. This year, the charity was Shelterbox, who provide emergency and disaster relief for families in need. Each year at the car show, there are approximately 400 vehicles in attendance, including cars, motorcycles, and even the occasional boat. And no, I am not just talking about R33 Skylines. As I come into the show, I'm greeted by a Datsun 1000 Coupe. This is a classic that goes back to an era of simplicity and charm. It's compact, and it's much smaller than you'd think. It's got humble performance, although many of them are heavily modified now, so who knows for sure what's going on with this. But it's definitely a tribute to the foundational years of Japanese automotive engineering. Next up, we have a plucky 89 Mazda 323. It's a front-wheel drive testament to functionality and a simple drive. It seems like an outlier amongst the classic cars, but as a reminder, it is from 1989, which makes it 34 years old, and a classic in its own right. And speaking of classics, traditionally at Australian car shows, there isn't much European representation. But today, there's quite the selection of BMWs, Rovers, and even a Citroen in the first row. So why for the longest time were European cars not found at car shows? Well, the historical reluctance towards European cars at Australian car shows can be traced to a strong domestic car culture that developed in Australia. There was the rise of the local car industry in the post-war era. Brands like Ford and Holdens became symbols of national pride and economic prosperity. The Australian market was dominated by local manufacturers and designs influenced by American parent companies. This domestic preference was bolstered by economic policies that protected Australian-made cars from overseas competition, encouraging a deep allegiance to local models. There's the ubiquitous Holden Toranas, and many Fords, especially Falcons, are heavily represented. In addition to this, American cars have also been historically popular in Australia due to the strong influence American automotive companies had on the Australian car market and culture. In the early stages of the Australian automotive industry, big American marques like Ford established a significant presence in Australia. And this is why, as we walk around, you'll see a lot of Chryslers, Chevrolets, and Fords, GMs of every different variety. The design and engineering of American cars greatly influenced the local Australian models, and the subsequent collaboration and investment from these American companies led to the creation of iconic Australian cars that had an undeniable American flair. The performance and style of American cars resonated with Australian consumers, contributing to their popularity at car shows alongside local Australian models. What differentiated local Australian models, though, is how they were designed for Australian roads, with, in comparison to American cars at least, being designed to be a lot sturdier and designed to deal with bumpy, rough roads and particularly dirt roads. There are also a lot of Japanese cars present, like the Datsun we saw a few moments ago. Those began to gain popularity in Australian car shows, particularly in the 1970s. You see, Toyota started manufacturing cars in Australia in 1963, and interestingly, became the country's largest vehicle exporter. The economic factors of the 70s, including the oil shocks and resulting fuel shortages, all things old become new again, huh? These made the industry increasingly uncompetitive against cheaper and more fuel-efficient imports. Consequently, Japanese cars like the Toyota Corolla, which was also manufactured in Australia, became a popular choice due to its affordability, reliability, and fuel efficiency. This shift reflected a global transition towards smaller, more economical cars during the period. And of course, with the majority of people owning cars like that, it altered the landscape of both the market and car shows. Which brings us to this Ford Falcon Coupe, which I find particularly interesting. This one was produced in 1974, but the owners fitted a late model Ford Falcon Turbo 6-cylinder. This phenomenon is known as retro tech or resto mods, and it refers to the practice of retrofitting classic cars with modern technology. I find this super interesting because in this case, in original condition, this car would easily be worth 140,000 Australian dollars or more, which is about 90,000 US. The owners clearly built this just for themselves and what they like, and I love that. It's doubly interesting because this style of modification, in my opinion, is heavily influenced by Japanese car culture, which in the traditional car scene would be looked down upon. But I didn't hear a single bad word spoken about this machine, which is good to see and hear. And now comes a long row of mixed Fords and Holdens, which were traditionally bitter rivals. At Australian car shows, in spite of this, it's common to see a mixed group of Fords and Holdens displayed together, because both brands are integral parts of the nation's automotive heritage. Despite the rivalry, enthusiasts often appreciate both for their historical significance, performance and cultural impact, which is not to say that the owners will not engage in a more than healthy amount of banter with each other. Just mention Bathurst wins at an Australian car show around a mixed group, and you can just watch the fireworks. Ultimately, these shows are not just about brand loyalty. You'd probably want to go to a brand-specific car show for something like that, such as the All Holden Day, which is in April. But also about celebrating the broader history of Australian motoring, where both Ford and Holden have played pivotal roles. And speaking of pivotal roles, hot rodding also plays a pivotal role in Australian car culture. It emerged during the 1940s and 50s, and was fueled by hot rodding magazines from the United States. Australia had an abundance of older, lower-cost vehicles and cheap V8 engines, and there was a lot of war surplus motors, and that all contributed to the popularity of hot rodding. By the 1960s, it was an established part of car culture, and there were clubs and car shows flourishing everywhere. The formation of the Australian Hot Rod magazine in 1964 and the Australian Street Rod Federation in 1974 further institutionalised this aspect of the car culture. These modified vehicles are often limited use, but are celebrated annually at national and state display events, which attract hundreds of vehicles and enthusiasts. As you can see, the timeline for all of these events, hot rodding, Japanese car culture, European cars, interbrand loyalty and so on, it all starts to meet up, and everything starts to influence everything else. Australian car culture is very much a reflection of the overall culture of the country, and it's multicultural. It reflects the diverse influences that have shaped the nation's landscape, evolving from a strong domestic manufacturing heritage to embracing European luxury and the innovative modifications of Japanese cars. Of course, everyone has their own tastes, but a great example of how this has changed over time is the acceptance of Datsun, now Nissan. In the post-war era, the general feeling about Japanese and German cars was at best suspicion, if not outright hatred. But as time went on, as immigration occurred, as cars were imported, and as times changed, it's pretty hard to find someone now who will outright say that they dislike Datsuns. It doesn't matter who they are. And if you ask the question at a general car show, I'll guarantee 9 out of 10 people will say they like Datsuns. And why is that? Well, it's all about that multiculturalism and its influence, whether they know it or not. Because of all these cultural influences, the modified car scene is dynamic and reflects broader social changes, including globalization. Events like cruising, racing, and car shows are not only venues for showcasing modified vehicles, but realistically, they're also catalysts for further innovation and expression within the culture. The gatherings serve as a melting pot, where different styles, technologies, and ideas are exchanged, and it leads to new trends, and that keeps the scene vibrant and ever-evolving. This is also where conflict can begin to creep in as the various subcultures and preferences intersect. In the modified car scene, enthusiasts may have different opinions on the correct way to modify a car or which influences to embrace. Examples could be muscle cars versus imports, V8s versus turbocharged 4-cylinders. A contentious example from the early 2000s was the term ricer, which was used to describe typically Asian-made cars that were modified for aesthetics, or modified in an over-the-top manner that rarely had actual performance benefits. The term dates back much further all the way to World War II. But the community pushback is a reflection of the tension between different philosophies within the car enthusiast communities. There are those that value performance and engineering, and they are up against those who prioritize aesthetic expression. Of course, this term is derogatory and borderline racist, but the term has come to encompass all cars these days that are modified in such a manner, not just Japanese cars. Interestingly as well, this style of modification has had a resurgence, and this is due to stricter and stricter laws that are countrywide, and they govern what one can do to your car from a legal perspective. At the end of the day, modifying a car is about expression, and if you can't change a car's performance, you can at least change the aesthetics. So the allure of modified cars is multifaceted, and it's deeply rooted in the desire for personal expression. It's the drive to imprint your identity onto a tangible canvas. Within the vibrant car modification community, enthusiasts find camaraderie and a shared passion, and exchange knowledge and celebrate creativity. The art of car modification itself is an ode to innovation, and each tweak, regardless of how extreme or small it might be, it still pushes the boundaries of automotive design and engineering. It's not just about aesthetics or mechanics or heightened performance or the roar of a more powerful engine or even improved handling. And for proof of that, all you need to do is look at the styles of modification that exist. People still modify cars with upgraded carburetors that cost as much or more than fuel injection conversions and perform worse. Suspension is installed that makes cars handle poorly, or even not be able to handle the slightest bump in a normal road, let alone a speed hump. Other people strip out their interiors to make their cars lightweight and sacrifice everything about the car that actually makes it practical. It's not about practicality. It's, I think, about the transformation of the ordinary into the extraordinary. And that's why so many people find car shows inspirational, even if they don't consider themselves car people. And I find this really interesting, because it leads to another subset of car show culture, which is concourse or veteran cars. There are a few of them in this video, and you can pick them quite easily. The general stance of owners of cars that focus on concourse or veteran status is that the historical preservation of cars in car culture is about maintaining the integrity and originality of the classic or vintage car. The prime element of this is by not modifying them at all. Enthusiasts who focus on historical preservation aim to restore cars to their factory specifications using period-correct parts and techniques. For some, this means the car has to look the way it rolled off the factory floor. For others, modifications are permitted just so long as they existed at the time the car was made, so the right aftermarket wheels or the right aftermarket carburetors. Many people openly mock this stance, as they say that the focus on purity of a factory car prevents you from actually enjoying it. In fact, a lot of YouTube channels openly poke fun at purity. Hey there, muddy car mods. But the influence is real. A lot of people know when something is going too far and they are perhaps ruining a vehicle. So, my stance is that if someone gets enjoyment from ensuring that something presents as new, who are we to say that this is right or wrong? People who like this sort of thing are often meticulous in their research, and they source original or faithfully reproduced components. The goal is to protect the vehicle's heritage and to present it as it would have been presented when first manufactured. This is an approach that respects the design and engineering of an era, and such cars are often showcased in museums, private collections, and concourse to elegance events, where originality and authenticity are highly prized. And here's the kicker. People find both styles, preservation and modification, be as inspiring as one another. And that's strange, right? But I think I can explain. Both highly modified and meticulously preserved cars evoke inspiration because they represent the pinnacle of automotive passion, albeit in different ways. Modified cars showcase personal expression, technical innovation, and the thrill of pushing boundaries. Preserved cars, on the other hand, embody historical significance, authenticity, and respect for the past. Both types of vehicles reflect dedication to the craft and a love of automotive culture. They both serve as a testament to the car's role not just as a mode of transportation, but as a canvas for creativity and the link to history. With all of these intricate balancing elements of culture versus innovation, modification versus preservation, and acceptance of change to the status quo, there's something that remains eternally on display at car shows like this. And that is, interestingly enough, the economic landscape of car culture. It's a perpetually shifting thing, and it's heavily influenced by the intricate balance of supply and demand. Classic cars tend to become rarer as time goes on, and as they're destroyed in accidents or through the vagaries of time or lack of care, otherwise known as rusting back into the ground from whence they came, classic cars are known to potentially be able to gain value faster than stocks, and people do use this as a means of speculating and generating wealth. Technical advancements also continuously introduce new modification options, altering both the cost and appeal of customizing vehicles. Cultural trends, which we've discussed, also play a significant role. For instance, the growing interest in environmentally friendly modifications, and electric vehicle conversions are becoming more and more popular and common. This reflects a broader societal move towards sustainability. Moreover, the global nature of the car market means that economic ripples in one part of the world can affect car values and the popularity of certain models on an international scale. Compounding these factors, there's also regulatory shifts, and that could dictate the viability and legality of various modifications, and that influences both current and future economic conditions of car collecting and customization. Then, add on top of this that each generation of driver finds, in general, that the era of cars that they learn to drive in are the ones that they want now that they're older. For proof of this, look at the explosion in value of the muscle cars from the 70s. Then, not 10 years later, the 80s sports cars and hot hatches exploded in value. And now, once again, 10 years later, Japanese, quote, hero cars, like Skylines and Silvias from the 90s, have doubled or even tripled in price. It's all because people want to have what they are attached to emotionally, but so does everyone else. For someone who wants to get into car shows, this means that there is a significant financial investment required, and this can happen when your peers may not have actually invested as much. Perhaps they were on the ground floor, so to speak. This means that even if you have the technical knowledge and know-how, you may not have the networking required to acquire rare or unusual cars or parts. There's also the possibility that market fluctuations will mean that a newcomer gets ultimately a bad deal. Does this mean you shouldn't try? Well, no, it just means you need to be aware of the variables before getting in. Or, do something out of the box. If everyone is interested in muscle cars, look at things that people have forgotten about or don't care as much about. In Australia, if you want a classic style of vehicle, you may be better off looking at a Humber instead of a Holden. Besides, that gives you the chance to do something original in the scene. So with all that said, Australian car culture is a rich tapestry woven from the threads of a diverse, global series of influences, and is a testament to the nation's eclectic and inclusive nature. From the roaring engines of American-inspired hot rods to the sleek modifications of Japanese imports, and the nostalgic reverence for historically preserved classics, the scene is as varied as it is vibrant. There's a culture that celebrates both the roar of modernity and the whisper of tradition, and every vehicle does tell a story of personal expression and communal identity. Regardless of whether you venture into this world late in life or early, you're going to embark on a journey of discovery, then navigating through revolving economics, technological advancements, regulatory landscapes, pretty much anything you care to name. The car show scene itself is a microcosm of creativity and nostalgia, and stands as a dynamic arena where the past is honoured, present is celebrated, and the future is generally eagerly anticipated. So with all of that rambling out of the way, let me show you a couple of cars in more detail that I find personally quite enthralling. First off, there's this, which is one of my favourite sports cars of all time, a Nissan S13 Silvia. What is unusual though, is that while this does have the infamous SR20 under the hood, it's a non-turbo. It has independent throttle bodies and a crazy tuned exhaust. This is a unique setup, and it skews the more common turbocharged approach, which emphasises a preference for responsiveness and engine sound. I think it makes it a standout example of individualistic car modification. It's incredibly tidy and it has beautiful paint. There's a meticulous attention to detail in its appearance that reflects the owner's dedication to maintaining aesthetic appeal, highlighting the pride and care that's been invested in this car. It's no wonder this has won awards at other shows. The interior is likewise neat and features bright seats, a royal steering wheel, and is in immaculate condition. It's sitting on genuine Longchamp XR4 wheels, which makes it take on a perfect stance. And I imagine it would be a blast to drive even though I'm a turbo enthusiast. The engine bay is, of course, clean enough to eat off of. Every element of the Silvia, from its engine to the interior, exudes a level of care and craftsmanship that make it a true gem. And it attracted a crowd all day and they poured over its every detail. I love it. Next up is a classic Toyota, an MX-32 Cressida. The car is in white, it's well maintained, and it's clean and elegant in appearance. What adds to its charm are the tastefully tinted windows, which blend seamlessly with the overall aesthetics. Remarkably, the interior seems entirely original. That's a rare sight. It also speaks volumes about the care and preservation invested into this vehicle. Also, notably, it is incredibly rare that this is in fact a manual. The wheels, although I cannot for the life of me remember what the design is called, are period-correct Japanese designs and perfectly complement the car's vintage. If you know what these wheels are, could you let me know in the comments? That would be incredible. This Cressida appears mostly original, but the tweaks that have been made give it an understated elegance. Next up, there is this. You might not recognize it, or maybe you might think it's some kind of early European supercar. But no, this is actually an Australian vehicle, the Bolwell Nagari. Its striking red colour highlights the car's bold and dynamic design, which was characteristic of the adventurous spirit of the Australian automotive industry in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Bolwell Nagari was a product of the brothers Graham, Campbell and Winston Bolwell, and was built with the vision to create a distinctively Australian sports car. The Nagari was Bolwell's answer to international models, combining lightweight construction with either a 302 or a 351 cubic inch Ford V8. It was celebrated for its innovative fiberglass body and a robust engine. The Nagari was a standout in Australian sports car manufacturing as it blended style with performance. The car, a product of the Bolwell brothers' ambition and ingenuity, served as a sort of symbol of Australian creativity and challenged international sports car norms, putting Australian car manufacturers on the world map. Hundreds of Bolwells are still registered in Australia, but they rarely make a showing at car shows. Seeing this one out and about today was an absolute joy. Next, let's turn our attention to this delightful 1985 Suzuki Super Carry K-Truck. Its vibrant yellow paint immediately draws the eye, and it embodies a sense of cheerfulness and utility. The Super Carry's compact and efficient design is a hallmark of the K vehicle class, which has developed in post-war Japan to meet the needs for small, affordable, and practical transportation. I love K-class vehicles, and in spite of restrictions on size and weight, they come in a shocking variety of styles, from trucks like this, to tiny sports cars, to vans, and of course, itsy-bitsy hatchbacks. This particular truck appears to be in pristine original condition, which is a rare find for a vehicle that's often subjected to the rigours of daily utility. The Super Carry's enduring design and this example's well-preserved state make it a charming and nostalgic piece, and it reflects the ingenuity of compact vehicle design from the 1980s. I also really appreciate that it's basically one big rectangle. And that has been my day at the incredible Westbury Car Show. As the day wears on and people start to leave, I'm left in awe of the incredible array of vehicles I've seen today, from the classic to the modern, from Fords to Fiat. Each car has told its own unique story under the brilliant sunshine. Speaking of, I can already feel the sunburn. It's days like these that remind us of the rich tapestry of automotive culture and the sheer joy that these machines can bring to our lives. Whether it's the thunderous roar of a modified engine or the quiet dignity of a perfectly preserved classic, I think there's something here that speaks to everyone. And if any of what I've talked about today has triggered any thoughts, memories, or just a smile, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your perspectives and stories add to the rich narrative of car culture. If you've enjoyed this journey through the world of automobiles, consider joining the community by subscribing or maybe even liking the video. I'll be back soon with a continuation of the Falcon vlog series, so I hope to see you then. Goodbye.